I'll never forget the day I stumbled upon the thread that changed everything. It was a typical Wednesday evening, and I was browsing through my favorite subreddit, r unexplained phenomena, when I came across an unusual post titled, "I spent 3 hours in the backrooms and got out alive." The user, who went by the username Throwaway420, claimed to have ventured into a realm that existed parallel to our own reality, and what they described sent shivers down my spine. The post was short and cryptic, but it sparked something within me, a morbid curiosity to uncover the truth behind this enigmatic place called the backrooms. As I delved deeper into the thread, I noticed that Throwaway 420 had left no digital footprint, no IP address, no social media presence. It was as if they never existed before or after posting their account. The more I read, the more I felt a creeping sense of unease in my stomach. I knew I had to investigate further. I started scouring online forums and Reddit communities for any mentions of the backrooms, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. It was as if the very existence of this realm was being deliberately concealed from the public eye. But then something caught my attention, a faint pattern in Throwaway 420's post that looked like a URL shortener link. I spent hours trying to decipher it, but to no avail. The symbol seemed to shift and change whenever I tried to analyze it further. It was as if it was mocking me, taunting me with secrets it refused to reveal. That's when I realized that the true horror wasn't in the backrooms themselves, but in the fact that someone had walked among us, hiding in plain sight. Someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the system and cover their tracks, and I was determined to find out who they were. I spent the next few days trying to uncover more information about the backrooms. I scoured Reddit, 4chan, and even dark web forums, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. It was as if someone had taken steps to erase all mention of this place from the internet. Frustrated and determined, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I created a new account on a VPN-enabled browser and began searching for any physical evidence of the backrooms. That's when I stumbled upon an old Reddit user with the username XXInsidiousXX, who claimed to have spent months exploring the backrooms. Their posts were sparse and cryptic, but they provided enough information to pique my interest. According to XXInsidiousXX, the backrooms existed on a dimensional plane that was invisible to the naked eye. They claimed that the only way to access this realm was through a specific doorway in an abandoned office building on the outskirts of town. I knew I had to investigate further. The thrill of discovery coursed through my veins as I made my way to the office building, my heart pounding in anticipation. As I approached the entrance, I noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had recently passed through it. A shiver ran down my spine as I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was stale and musty, and I could feel the weight of years of neglect bearing down upon me. I fumbled for my phone to light up the dark space, but the screen refused to turn on. Panic began to set in as I realized I was completely alone, with no way to communicate the outside world. And then I heard it, a faint whispering in the distance, echoing off the walls. It sounded like hundreds of voices, all speaking at once. The words were indistinguishable, but the tone was unmistakable, a cold, calculated malevolence that sent chills down my spine. I knew I had to get out of there, but as I turned to leave, I realized that the door was no longer behind me. It had disappeared into thin air. I was trapped. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease as I frantically searched for a new exit. But as I turned around, I was met with an unsettling sight rows upon rows of identical doorways, stretching out into the darkness like a never-ending labyrinth. The whispering voices seemed to be coming from all directions now, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, with sunken eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Its skin was deathly pale, and it moved with an unnatural gait that sent shivers down my spine. The figure didn't speak, but instead gestured for me to follow it. I hesitated for a moment, but something compelled me to move forward. We walked in silence, the only sound being the soft crunch of gravel beneath our feet. The figure led me deeper into the labyrinth, until we reached a large chamber filled with rows upon rows of identical workstations. Each workstation was occupied by a single individual, all staring blankly at their computers as if in a trance-like state. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I realized that these people were not human. They were some sort of twisted experiment, created to serve the backroom's sinister purpose. The figure stopped in front of one workstation and gestured for me to approach. As I did, I saw my own reflection staring back at me from the computer screen. But something was wrong. My eyes were black as coal, and my skin was deathly pale. I stumbled backward, horrified by what I saw. The figure didn't flinch, but instead leaned forward and whispered a single word in my ear. I tried to process what the figure had just whispered in my ear. But before I could react, it reached out and touched a small, red thread that was tied around its wrist. The thread seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and as soon as it made contact with my skin, I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. The figure pulled me closer, its eyes burning with an intense gaze. And then, everything went white. When my vision returned, I found myself standing in front of a large metal door adorned with strange symbols and markings. The figure gestured for me to open the door, but as I reached out to touch it, I felt a sudden surge of fear. Something was wrong. The air around us seemed to be thickening, like a fog was rolling in. And then I heard it, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to be coming from the very walls themselves. The figure's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw something there that chilled me to the bone, a deep, abiding hunger. It wanted me to open the door. It wanted me to let it out. I tried to resist, but my hand seemed to move of its own accord. The door creaked open, revealing a void so dark it was like looking into the very abyss itself. And then everything went black. When I came to, I found myself back in the labyrinth, the figure nowhere to be seen. But as I looked down at my hands, I saw that they were tied together with the same red thread. And on my wrist, a small crimson tattoo had appeared, a tattoo that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy of its own. I stumbled through the labyrinth, desperate to find a way out. But every door I opened led only to more of the same twisted corridors and chambers. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart skip a beat. A glimmer of light, shining like a beacon in the darkness. It was faint at first, but as I drew closer, it grew brighter and brighter until I could see the outlines of a door. A real door with a doorknob and everything. I stumbled towards it, my hands reaching out to grasp the cold metal. As I turned the handle and pushed the door open, a warm light spilled in, illuminating the dark space around me. I blinked in the bright light, feeling like I was seeing reality for the first time in weeks. But as I looked around, I realized that something was off. The room wasn't quite right. The furniture was all wrong, and the walls seemed to be made of a material I'd never seen before. And then I saw it. A woman standing in front of me with piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through me. She smiled, and I felt like I was drowning in her gaze. "Welcome home," she said, her voice low and husky. "You've been here for a long time." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The woman took a step closer, her eyes never leaving mine, and then everything went black again. As I came to, I found myself back in the labyrinth, but something was different. The walls seemed to be closing in on me, and the air was thick with an eerie, pulsating energy. I stumbled through the corridors, desperate to escape, but every door I opened led only to more of the same twisted passages. And then I heard it, a voice whispering in my ear. "You'll never leave," it said. "You'll never be free." The voice was mine own, or so it seemed. But as I looked down at my hands, I saw that they were no longer my own. They were twisted and distorted like something out of a nightmare. I tried to scream, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of my own mind shattering. The voice laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're one of us now," it said. "You'll never be sane again." As the voice spoke, the world around me began to distort and twist. The walls seemed to melt away, revealing a landscape of twisted, nightmarish visions. I stumbled through this surreal realm, pursued by the voice that haunted my every step. And then I saw it. A figure standing in front of me. It was myself, or so it seemed. But as I looked into its eyes, I saw something there that chilled me to the bone, a deep, abiding madness that seemed to be staring back at me from the very depths of my own soul. As I stared into the eyes of my own reflection, I felt a creeping sense of dread. The madness that lurked within me seemed to be spreading, tendrils of insanity reaching out to snare me whole. And then I saw it. A figure standing just behind my reflection, watching me with cold, calculating eyes. It was the woman from the door, but her features were twisted and distorted, like she was made of some dark, malevolent material. She smiled, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "You see, you're not who you think you are," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "You're just a pawn in a much larger game." As she spoke, the room around us began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting reality. I stumbled forward, desperate to escape, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The woman reached out a hand and touched my face, and suddenly I was flooded with visions of ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge. I saw the labyrinth for what it truly was, a prison designed to drive mortals mad. And at its heart, a dark and sinister plot unfolded like a twisted game of chess. The woman's eyes seemed to bore into mine, searching for something. "You have a role to play in this," she said, her voice dripping with malevolence. "A role that only you can fulfill." As I listened, frozen in terror, the world around me seemed to implode, collapsing into a vortex of madness and despair. I stumbled through the twisting corridors of my own mind, desperate to escape the labyrinth of madness. But every door I opened led only to more questions. Who was I? What was my purpose? And what lay at the heart of this twisted game? I finally found myself standing in front of a large, ornate mirror. It reflected back an image that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. The eyes that stared back at me were black as coal and seemed to hold a deep and ancient wisdom. I reached out a trembling hand to touch my face, and as I did, the mirror shattered into 1,000 shards of glass. Behind it, a figure stood waiting. It was the woman from the door, but her features were now familiar, like I had seen them before in a dream or a vision. She smiled, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. "You have faced your own madness," she said. "Now you must face the truth." And with that, she revealed to me the secrets of the labyrinth. It was not a prison, but a test of wills, of courage, and of the human spirit. I had been chosen to play this game, to navigate its twisting corridors and emerge victorious. But at what cost? As I looked into her eyes, I saw that she was not just a woman, but a reflection of myself. A reminder that the line between madness and sanity is thin indeed. And that sometimes, the only way to escape is to confront the truth. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, into the unknown. The air was thick with an eerie, pulsing energy that seemed to vibrate through every cell in my body. I could feel the weight of the labyrinth bearing down on me, but I pressed on, driven by a burning need to uncover the secrets that lay within. As I walked, the walls around me began to shift and writhe like living things. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. I felt like I was being herded towards some unknown destination, but I didn't know what that was or why I had to get there. Suddenly, the walls parted and I found myself standing at the edge of a vast, empty space. The ceiling lost in darkness, the floor made of cold, gray stone, and in the center of it all, a single door. It was old and worn, with strange symbols etched into its surface. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached it. This was it. This was the heart of the backrooms. I reached out a trembling hand to touch the door, and as I did, it swung open with a dreadful creak. Beyond it lay a world unlike any I had ever seen. A world of twisted corridors and dark, foreboding rooms, and at its center, a figure waiting for me. It was myself, or so it seemed. But as I looked into its eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Something that told me I was not alone in this place. I stumbled forward, drawn by an otherworldly force. The figure before me didn't flinch or blink, its eyes fixed on mine with an unblinking stare. I felt a sense of detachment, as if I was watching myself from outside my own body. The air around us seemed to ripple and distort, like the surface of a pond hit by a stone. And then, in an instant, everything went black. When I came to, I found myself standing in a vast, empty space. The sky above was a deep, bloody red, and the ground beneath my feet was dry, cracked earth. In the distance, I saw a figure walking towards me. It was the woman from the door, but her features were now twisted and distorted, like she was being pulled apart by some unseen force. "Welcome to the other side," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "where sanity is just a distant memory." As she spoke, the world around us began to distort and writhe, like a living thing in agony. I stumbled forward, desperate to escape, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The woman reached out a hand and touched my face, and suddenly I was flooded with visions of madness and despair. I saw myself trapped in a never-ending loop of terror, unable to escape. I saw others, 2 friends and family, all of them screaming and crying as they were consumed by some unseen horror. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The visions faded and I was left standing alone in the desolate wasteland. But I knew that I was not alone. There was something else here with me, watching me from the shadows, something that waited for me to make my next move. I took a step forward and the world around me began to unravel. The woman's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and I felt a sense of inevitability wash over me. I was being pulled towards some unknown fate and I couldn't stop it. The air grew colder and the shadows deepened until they seemed to have a life of their own. I stumbled forward, blindly following the woman's lead. We walked through a landscape that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. The sky was a deep, bloody red, and the ground beneath my feet was dry, cracked earth. Every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was surrendering to some ancient power. And then we reached the edge of a great precipice. A chasm stretched out before us, yawning open like a mouth of madness. The woman didn't hesitate, she simply walked forward into the void. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. As we stepped onto the precipice, the ground gave way beneath our feet and we fell. We fell through a vortex of colors and sounds until everything went black. When I came to, I was standing in a room filled with strange and wondrous things. There were tables and chairs, but they seemed to be made of twisted, nightmarish wood. The walls were adorned with symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. And in the center of it all, a figure waited for me. It was the woman, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly power. She spoke in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien. "Welcome home," she said. "You'll never leave." I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling from the woman's words. I knew that I had to escape, but every door I tried led only to more terrors. The room seemed to shift and change around me, like a living, breathing entity determined to crush me. I saw things that couldn't be real, twisted creatures lurking in the shadows, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I heard whispers in my ear, tempting me to surrender to the madness, but I refused to give up. I knew that I had to keep moving, no matter what horrors lay ahead. I pushed forward, driven by a desperate determination to survive. The woman watched me, her eyes never leaving mine. She seemed to be waiting for something, but I didn't know what. I stumbled through the twisting corridors, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step felt like a battle, as if I was fighting against the very fabric of reality. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on, I saw a glimmer of light. It was a door, and it seemed to be calling to me. I stumbled towards it, my legs shaking with exhaustion. As I reached out to touch the handle, I felt a hand on my shoulder. The woman's eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't speak. She simply pulled me back, holding me in place. "You can't escape," she hissed. "You'll never be free." But I knew that I had to try. I wrenched myself free from her grasp and flung open the door. A blast of light illuminated the dark corridor, and for a moment everything seemed okay. But as my eyes adjusted to the brightness, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The woman was standing right behind me, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly power. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on a soft, white surface. I sat up, groggily taking in my surroundings. I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by sterile white walls and beeping machines. The woman was nowhere to be seen. But as I looked down at my hands, I saw something that made my blood run cold. They were twisted and distorted, like they had been manipulated by some unseen force. And then it hit me. I wasn't alone in the hospital. There were others here too, all of them trapped in their own personal hells. And as I looked around, I saw the faces of my friends and family, all of them screaming and crying as they struggled to survive the eternal nightmare.